Welcome everyone to the New York State PTA webinar series, and this particular series is PowerPoint, is Nominations and Elections. My name is Jacqueline Wilson. I'm the New York State PTA Bylaws Coordinator, and my contact information is on the first slide. So at the end, if we don't get to your questions, please feel free to email me any additional questions you may have. We started this series about 3 years ago, and we have tried to make it available to anyone who would like to attend as a much easier and way to get to a workshop if, for example, you can't get out to a region or a unit workshop. So let's start. So nominations are in order. First of all, the New York State PTA Resource Guide, which is available to everyone on the New York State website. Section 7 has everything you need to know about nominations and elections and bylaws and procedures. So it's a great section for every unit to have handy. The entire resource guide is great, but when you're coming to nominations and elections, that would be the section that you want to have available. Nominating committee is where leadership begins. It's the most responsible and sensitive and deliberate body. The nominating committee must be elected in accordance with the bylaws. We do not appoint them, and this goes on from the smallest unit all the way up to the national PTA. Nominating committee is always elected. According to your bylaws, it must be elected 60 days before the election month. So, for example, if your election month is March, and that is in your bylaws, you would need to so 60 days before the election, but it should be as early as possible. I also put up 2 documents, 1 and 2, which are on the web, in the website, and if you didn't get them out, you can look at them, and these are 2 documents that can be very helpful in answering questions. One is the nominating committee checklist and the nominations and elections Q&A. So those both are great for the president to take a look at, as well as, of course, the nominating committee chairman. It really goes through step by step what needs to be done to get the nominating committee process started from start to finish. The importance of bylaws. Again, the other documents that's extremely important in the nominating committee process is your bylaws. They will tell you the makeup of the committee. If you are to elect an alternate, some bylaws do have an alternate as being part of the nominating committee, some do not. The chair is always elected by the committee. Officers to be elected in term of office, so it will tell you whether you have presidents, co-presidents, how many vice presidents, do you have 1 secretary or 2, treasurer, those would be your officers, and those are listed in your bylaws. And it also tells you about council delegates. How are they chosen? They can be either elected with the officers, or they can be appointed by the president, or they can be elected by the executive board. And again, that is listed in your bylaws. So if they are, in fact, elected by the membership along with the officers, then the nominating committee would need to know they need to nominate some people for the council delegate position. When the committee will publish the proposed slate, that is something that is in the most recent update of the Wizard, that all PTAs must publish their proposed slate either 2 weeks or 1 month prior to the election meeting. And again, your bylaws will tell you that. It will tell you the month of the election meeting, March, April, May, or June, and how to deal with a vacancy. So here are the sections in the bylaws where you can find what I just mentioned. Section 2 defines the offices to be elected, the time and method of election, the terms of eligibility, and the terms of office. Are they for a 1-year term, or 2 consecutive 1-year terms, or 1 2-year term? What are your officers? Section 3 defines the makeup of the nominating committee. If you have an alternate elected, when is the date of the election meeting? Again, it must be 60 days prior to your election meeting. And when the report must be published, and how nominations can be made from the floor. Section 4 explains the method of dealing with a vacancy. So this is important, as well as to become familiar with the duties of the offices to be filled. Again, you need to be able to do that to discuss what exactly you're asking the person you are nominating to do. And there are some brief descriptions in your bylaws. However, there should be a a much more comprehensive description of what each of the offices do in your procedures. And lastly, Article 13, Section 1 gives information on council delegates. How many council delegates do we have? And that is, again, according to your council bylaws, and how are they chosen? So the nominating committee members should include both experienced and new members, be elected on merit and ability, be aware of the responsibilities of their assignment, have knowledge of the PTA goals, purposes, and programs, have knowledge of potential nominees' qualifications and abilities, give objective consideration of nominees, be able to express ideas and defend their own convictions. That's very important. Use sound judgment, be tactful, integrity, use discretion. And the last one of the most important things in nominating committee members is keep deliberations confidential. To ensure the full availability of a committee, if you need to elect an alternate, obviously you have, let's say you need to get 3 people on the nominating committee and you need 1 alternate, so you would obviously have to take 4 names, and then the person who has the least number of votes would be then the alternate. So you must do it by ballot if you do need an alternate. If you have 4 people, as being odd number, 3 people who are nominated and nobody else, and you only need 3 people on the committee, then obviously those 3 people could be elected by voice vote. Okay? For preparation for the meeting, again, bylaws, procedures, job descriptions, resource guide, and I have a little asterisk there at the bottom because this would be an excellent time to write procedures for your nominating committee if your unit does not have them. And it's good to do it right after the committee has gone through their deliberations and met, because everything is fresh in your mind and you can literally write down the steps. This is what we do, number 1, number 2, number 3, and then bring that along to be part of your procedures. It's tough to say would never approach a potential nominee as to their willingness or make any commitments, because suppose that person among the nominating committee members is not the person that is chosen. And now you've gone to them and you've said, well, you know, I think you make a great vice president and I'm going to put your name up. And maybe that person says, okay, that sounds like a good idea, but don't talk them into something that they might not be ready to take on the responsibility of. You can send out recommendation forms to the membership for input for potential nominees. And so I have 2 documents there on the web, documents 3 and 4. Document 3 refers to a letter to the membership. It's just a generic letter, okay, about telling when the election meeting is, where to send your forms. And then document 4 is just a typical recommendation form. You would put the name of each office and then the person's name and qualifications, and that should be sent back to the chair of the nominating committee, and then it's only opened on the day of the nominating committee meeting. The chairman should select, okay, the chairman who is elected by the committee. Now the committee's elected at the meeting. They can meet at the end of the meeting and get together and decide, okay, we need a chairman. Somebody may step up and everybody agrees, however you do it, but it is selected by the committee. You should first select a time and place for the meeting that will allow for privacy. A library may have a room available to you that is private, certainly someone's home. I would never suggest doing it at a diner unless you can have a private room someplace. And even the school can be difficult because there's always people around. The last thing you want is undue influence by another another member of the PTA, the president, or the principal to affect your deliberations. So try to make it a private place. And also hold the meeting when all members can attend. One thing I've seen done is that, oh yeah, we'll meet next Tuesday because I know so-and-so can't make it, so we didn't really want her on the committee anyway. And this is done, and it's certainly not fair. So certainly all members of the committee should be aware of the time and place and agree to it, as well as if you have an alternate, that person should also be aware of the time and date and place of the meeting. Okay? Have a telephone available and a membership list. You're only going to nominate people who are members, obviously, and only those elected to serve may attend. There are no extras or invitees at the nominating committee meeting. President can never be a member. Okay, they are a member of every other committee except nominating and audit. So they are not there. They are not in on the deliberations. They can give their input just like anyone else can by making recommendations. The principal, okay, or board members, other board members should not be at the meetings unless they are elected. Okay, if the principal is on your PTA, he or she certainly can be elected to the nominating committee as well. But if they are not, that is not part of their job to come in on your nominating committee meeting, okay? You certainly want to ask the president and other board members for how certain members who have served as officers have done, or chairmen, how they've done their jobs. There's nothing wrong with that, to find out a little bit about your potential candidates for the nominating slate. You inform the members of the results of the contacts. So the chairman generally makes the contacts, okay, in terms of calling potential nominees. And then you complete a written report signed by all committee members. Now, suppose that you have met and you have one person that you have not gotten in contact with, and you're not sure if they're going to say yes or no. So you might have another alternative. So let's say we decided Joe would be a good president, but we're not sure if he's available. So does everybody agree we'll accept James if Joe is not available? And you know that can be done in case, because you don't want the meeting to be going on through the middle of the night. So the chairman has that responsibility to say to the members, if they all agree, okay, certainly if they don't, then you'd have to convene the meeting again. But if everyone agrees, the chairman can then call that person at another time that's more convenient for them, or leaving a message is not a good idea, or call the potential second person if there is a second person, if the first person says no. Okay? You should know the chairman should notify the president of the completion of the slate when it is all done. Advise the nominees to attend the election meeting and the installation of officers. Nominees are still eligible to be elected even if they are unable to attend because they have been nominated by the committee. You would reconvene the committee in the event the nominee withdraws their name before the election meeting. So you have your slate of officers done, and now the election meeting is in 2 weeks, and one of the potential candidates calls the nominating committee chair and says, my husband just got a job promotion, we're going out of town, I cannot accept the nomination. In that case, since it's before the election meeting, you can call the nominating committee back together to decide upon a new person to fill that position. See that the names of nominees are published in accordance with the bylaws. And also when publishing the report, make sure you include the date of the election, okay, and whether or not you have the clause in your bylaws that a 2-day notice is required in order to run from the floor. That's important for people to know, so that if they decide they wish to challenge someone on the slate of officers being proposed, they understand that if it's a 2-day notice, they need to notify the nominating committee chair within 2 days of the election meeting in order to run from the floor. Okay, and then of course present the nominating committee report at the election meeting. So this is something, by publish we mean that it goes up on your Facebook page, it goes up on your bulletin board, it goes in your PTA newsletter, whatever means you use to connect with your PTA members so that everyone sees the nominating committee slate prior to the election meeting. And there's that little section at the bottom that I've added, which comes directly from Robert's Rules, which of course is our parliamentary authority, where advance interest in the election may develop. The nomination submitted by the committee should be made known to the membership earlier. So it is the right of the members to know who are these people that have been nominated for office. Criteria, just generally, you can look through that. That's really just kind of, things that you want to look for in a potential person who might be make a good officer. Consider the leadership that will best achieve the aims and purposes of the PTA. And this is important. Review the tenure of the incumbent officers to determine their eligibility. Remember that they are eligible, not entitled, for another term in the same office or in another position. So just because they are president this year and they can serve another year, okay, doesn't mean that they're automatically entitled. They still need to be nominated again. That's important. People think, well, we only have a secretary that's going, so we only need to nominate a secretary. You need to nominate every officer, okay, each time, especially if it's a 1-year term. Even if they've only served 1 year, they still must be nominated again. But again, if they're not doing a good job, or they've missed a lot of meetings, or they haven't done their reports, you might want to think about not putting them in that position again. All officers' terms are for 1 year unless specified otherwise in the bylaws. No person is automatically nominated for a second term. And one thing is to avoid reshuffling officers. You want to try to grow your leadership by bringing in new people. Instead of, okay, you're vice president this time, now you're going to go become secretary, then you're going to become, corresponding secretary, then you become vice president, you're going to be president, then you're going to go back and be treasurer. And now you're not allowing for your leadership to grow and bringing in potential new people to your PTA, and your PTA is not going to survive. Think carefully about the nominees, their qualifications, their ability to work well with others, and if they have sufficient time to do the job. Never tell a potential nominee that, oh, it's just the vice presidency, and that's one I've heard often. Don't worry, it's just being vice president. Don't forget that if you have a vice president and a president, and the president is unable to make a meeting, that vice president is the next one in line to run that meeting. So they clearly have a responsibility to know what's going on at all times and to work closely with the president. So that's a very important position. It's not just a position where you are just sitting there doing nothing, and it should not be. Nominate one person to serve in each office. Develop a tentative slate of officers with possible alternatives for each office to be filled. Okay, unanimous consent is desirable. You can always have another meeting. If for some reason you're not coming to a consensus, you can always adjourn the meeting and have a second meeting if necessary. Avoid putting a past president into a vice presidency. This is a position where one can learn about being president. And again, I stress this many times, keep all deliberations confidential. And you never want to say to a nominee, well, we're nominating you because Joe didn't want it, or, you're our second choice. I mean, that's really unfair. And, you just tell them we're asking you. They don't have to know if you've called other people or not. Maybe you have, maybe you haven't. But make sure that you're honest with them, but you're asking them because you feel they'll be doing the best job, not because they're the fourth person that fourth person that had to be called. So when you're reporting, you're going to document number 5 is an acceptance letter, and that just goes to each of the nominees so that they can sign and say, yes, I agree. So if come time of the election meeting that nominee is unable to attend for whatever reason, you have in writing that they have agreed to serve. Okay, and then the last is the report of the nominating committee, which should be signed, and that is a document that gets filed into the minutes. And remember, the minutes are the official record of your PTA. So therefore, that nominating committee report becomes part of your minutes for that meeting. And once your report is presented at the election meeting, then the nominating committee is discharged. That is the end of your job. How do you deal with resignations? As I said before, if somebody resigns before the election meeting for whatever personal reason or anything, then yes, you can reconvene the nominating committee. If they resign after they've been elected, then your bylaws deal with that by having the executive board meeting to fill the vacancy that's in place. So there are two different things. It's different whether it's before the election meeting or after they have been elected. Do's and don'ts. Again, this is part of document number 6, Q&A. That's actually document number 1, I'm sorry. I have the wrong number there. Do consider it a privilege on the nominating committee. It is a big deal, okay? It's not an easy job, okay, because you have to truly decide which persons will be the best suited to be a part of your officers for that year. Nominate those right for the job. Tell prospective nominees exactly what the job entails. Consider new people on their strengths and abilities to help your PTA grow. And yes, a member of the nominating committee can be nominated for office. That's perfectly acceptable. Don't consider it an imposition on your time. Don't select people because they expect to be asked. Nominate people because you're friends. Tell tales outside of the room. Say it's not a big job. Reject someone because they look or dress differently. It will give the impression of your PTA as a clique. And we hear that all the time. The same people get nominated. They won't allow other people on. So it's important to take this particular job as part of the nominating committee very seriously. So now the nominating committee has done their job, and now what happens next is you come to the election meeting, okay? So the bylaws will tell you the month that your meeting that the election meeting is being held, so that would be either March, April, May, or June, and they will also let you know if there's the clause in there that says the bylaws require a 2-day notice for intent to run, okay? And if that happens, then the chair will notify the president of that. So a person must then send in writing to the chair of the nominating committee, I plan to run for president at the election meeting, and sign it and date it, and it must be 2 business days prior to the election meeting. So we're now at the election meeting. The presiding officer, usually the president, calls upon the chairman to read the report of the nominating committee. So the chairman of the nominating committee comes up and reads the slate of officers as proposed for president, for vice president, and so on. If there is only one nominee for an office, the election can be held by voice vote, okay? So you would take first president, the chair would say, not the chair, the presiding officer. The chairman of the committee does not run the election. It is the president or the presiding officer, in the case of the president's absence, chairs that meeting and does the election, not the chairman of the nominating committee. So for president, the nomination is Joe Smith. Now it may be one of two things. If your bylaws do not call for a 2-day notice, then the president would say, are there any further nominations from the floor? At that time, someone could get up and say, I would like to run from the floor. Okay, I plan on running for president. That's only if your bylaws allow that. In that case, okay, then you would have to go to a ballot vote, and we'll go on to that in a minute. If the chairman has any intent to run, so the president will say to the chairman, have you been notified of any intent to run requests from any of the members? And the chairman will say, no, I have none for the office of president, okay? And then you proceed with the voice vote, okay? So if the chairman does receive an intent to run, yes, I received a letter from Jane saying that she would like to run for president. Now you have to go to an election. Anytime there is more than one person who is being considered for an office, you must have a ballot vote. But again, you have to look to your bylaws to determine whether or not it does say that you need 2-day notice or that you can run from the floor. You're still never taking away the ability of any member who is qualified to run from the floor, okay, who is a member. Whether or not it's a 2-day notice or whether it's, just running from the floor on the election day. That's why we need you to publish the slate 2 weeks or 1 month prior. So everybody knows what I need to do. Can I run from the floor? Yes. Do I need a 2-day notice? Yes. So therefore everybody is aware of that prior to the election meeting. So now, if the presiding officer asks for nominations from the floor, they can be made by any member at the election meeting, okay? If there are 2 or more candidates, the election must be by ballot. If the nominating committee is unable to fill an office, let's say they could not find anybody for vice president, okay, then the office is vacant and anybody can run from the floor, because at that point there's no 2-day notice because it's a vacancy, nobody stepped up for it, so therefore anybody could run from the floor for that particular office and nominations would be taken from the floor. So if you have a ballot vote, what do you do? Well, if you know that your bylaws state that you need 2 days 2 days prior for intent to run, then you can fill out ballots ahead of time. So you could fill out a ballot for president, Joe or Jane, okay, and have those available for distribution. So the secretary, however, should always be prepared with blank ballots, because if you do not have the 2-day intent to run, then you won't know until you get to the election meeting whether or not somebody will run from the floor or challenge that person for the office. So the secretary should always be prepared with ballots and teller sheets. Teller sheets are just ways to calculate, to kind of write down the tallies as the people go to vote. So the first thing the president will do will explain the procedure for distribution. voting and collection of ballots. They will appoint 2 tellers. Obviously, neither one of the tellers can be a person who's running for office. So the president will say, okay, our 2 tellers are, so these 2 people, they will, you have to get a card, a ballot from the membership chairman who will have the membership list in front of them, and you have to sign for your ballot, write the first name and last initial of the person on the ballot, fold the ballot in half, and hand it to the tellers. Or if you have a ballot box, place it in the ballot box. So those instructions should be clearly explained to everybody prior to the election taking place. A list of members is provided by the membership chair, and you must be a current member to vote. Now, this always brings up the question of, well, what if I'm not a member? Can I vote in the election? What you would do is establish a time. You would say, all persons who are joining, if you wish to vote in the election, you must be joined by 6:30. The meeting is starting at 7. So there's no trying to, sell or put up memberships prior to right before the election. So there could be a time given that prior to the meeting, before 6:30, if you wish to join, and it's so easy now with going online and doing it by a member hub, so you can pretty much join in just a few minutes. So it's not like you have to wait and sign a card and hand the cash and so on, and the membership person has to write you down. So therefore, you can do that. You can set up a time and place that members can join prior to the meeting if they wish to vote. And because you cannot have a person who's not a member be voting. They can certainly be at the meeting, but they are not allowed to vote unless they are on that membership list. So the ballots are given to tellers to hand out to the members present. There are no absentee ballots. Remember we said that. Ballots are collected by the tellers or placed in a ballot box. Again, whatever your procedure is. And then the tellers leave the room to count the ballots using a tally sheet. Okay? So you can, if you can probably wait for, best scenario is to wait for the ballots to be counted and the results to be brought in, so you could just kind of temporarily adjourn the meeting, what we call stand down, and then people are free to talk or whatever, and then when the tellers come back, then you can announce the winner of the election. The person elected who has the majority of votes is the winner, of course. There might be blank ballots. Obviously, they don't count. There could be illegal ballots. Somebody writes 2 names instead of 1. Somebody writes only an initial. I mean, there's a lot of ways ballots can be illegal. And why would you need to take a revote? Okay, a revote would be if nobody had a majority, okay? And destroying the ballots. You can make a motion to destroy the ballots, or you can make a motion to hold them for 30 days. And an election is only valid as long as a quorum is present. And what is a quorum for a general election meeting? That is in your bylaws. Okay, and so you need to know that as the president, obviously, would need to know that. Make sure that you have a quorum before you start any kind of ballot vote. Okay, even if the number of persons voting is less than the quorum, as long as there's a quorum at the meeting, you can take a vote. So the presiding officer reads the election results. The secretary records the results in the minutes, just as the tellers have recorded it. So total ballots cast, 40. Amy had 25 votes. Bill had 13 votes. The illegal ballots were 2, so clearly Amy received a majority of the votes. She would need at least 21 to win. She had 25. So therefore, Amy would be declared the winner. If for some reason they tied, or if for some reason Amy only got 20 votes and Bill had, whatever the other number, 20 votes or 19, you would have to have another ballot vote. Okay, so it is election by majority, right? And of course, the illegal ballots are anything, as I mentioned before, not written correctly, name wrong, didn't list the name or whatever, or put 2 names in. Okay. So there you've completed your responsibility in the process, and by following the bylaws and procedures, you've ensured that you put together a slate of officers that will guide your membership well and continue the goal and mission of your PTA. And I did include a document number 7, which are the benefits of a year-round nominating committee. At Suffolk Region, we elect part of our nominating committee in May at our spring conference, and we elect the rest of them at the second meeting of the year. So therefore, they pretty much stay or are involved with, observing people, seeing how they work for most of the entire year. So the earlier the better, because then those people in the nominating committee can truly have a sense of, who's coming to events, how are they working, do they work well with others, are they absent at meetings, are they coming to meetings, are they contributing to meetings? So it does help, and so that was another document that I gave you. Okay, so that is our end of our presentation here. Okay, all right. So what we want to do is now go to our chat room here. Okay, and okay, so we have, what if your council, on your council there is no members? I'm not sure about that question. Is the person who answered that question on? What if on your council there is no members? I'm not sure what that question is. Your council bylaws will state what, how many people are from your unit allowed to be part of council. So how many council, what we call council delegates, and that would be then listed in your bylaws. So I'm not sure what that question is. So I don't think I can answer that question unless the person wants to explain what they wrote. Okay. Amendments to bylaws require a 30-day notice to your membership, right? As do bylaws. If you don't want to change the bylaws in a 2-day notice rule, yes, they would have to give the membership 30 days, and then it would have to be approved by your region bylaws chair, and then it would come to me as bylaws coordinator. So that's what happens with an amendment. Okay. The 2-day notice is, as I said before, a good thing, because that is something that will allow your unit to be prepared for an election. Okay, in Suffolk we use a 7-day rule, that you have 7 days to notify the region director if you plan to run from the floor. And this way, if we have to have an election for our officers at spring conference, we can be prepared with ballots ahead of time, and it makes the process a little bit easier. And then we can, set up a procedure for how we're going to handle more than one candidate. Okay, so that's a good thing to know. But some units don't like to have to do that. Okay. Would love for New York State PTA to use the term chairperson. Okay, a good point, and we've talked about that, and we try to include that. To tell you the truth, Robert's rules always use chairman, okay, and unfortunately that's the way I was brought up, but chairperson, like I say, is not something Robert's rules uses, but we can certainly make an effort to put that into our PowerPoints, not a problem. When you say deliberations, you are not including reaching out to board members for feedback. Is that allowed, correct? Yes, you're going to get feedback, because the first thing you do before you deliberate is you send out recommendation forms. And they can be anonymous, you don't have to sign them, but this way you're getting feedback from anyone who wishes to give you feedback about the possibility of a person being a good candidate for an office. So that is how you get your feedback. Then you look at those recommendation forms at the meeting, okay, when you're deliberating, okay, and then you can decide that, look at this person, she has these great qualities. Because after all, you as nominating committee members do not know everyone in the PTA, but there might be some people out there who would be great candidates, and you're not really sure about them. But if you have a number of recommendations that say this person would be a great asset as an officer, that might be a person you want to consider. So absolutely, you're reaching out. Every member of your PTA, any member of your PTA can send in recommendation forms. Any member actually can send in recommendation forms. Any person, I should say, in your school. So they can recommend people to you. And again, it helps you because you might not know who these people are. Okay, hope that answers the question. If I didn't answer the question, then just let me know. You can just kind of chime in, and let me just go up a little bit. Okay. Documents, the website is on the website. Okay, right, and Dana gave you the page there for the website under the leadership training materials. There's also the entire resource guide is on there where I mentioned about the documents pertaining to nominations and elections in Section 7. Okay, you said that current board members must be renominated. This is not true for a board member who is a 1-year through a 2-year term. Whoops, hold up, I'm losing my question here. Let me go back up. You said that current board members must be renominated. No, I said they are eligible, not entitled. Okay, so if you have a president who is in a first year of a 2-year term, they can be renominated. They are eligible to be renominated, but they are not entitled. Okay, so that's up to your nominating committee to decide. If that person has not been doing a good job and you've had a lot of issues in your PTA, then why would you want them on there? So they are eligible, not entitled. And that would be for any term, okay, for any 1-year term. They are eligible for a 2nd year, but not necessarily entitled. Okay, let's go down. If a unit would like to change their bylaws, we did that one. There are questions during the nominating committee meetings. Can you reach out for feedback, or can the nominating committee chair ask for feedback after meetings have taken place? Questions being what particular questions? Can somebody tell me about that one? No? If there are questions during the nominating committee meetings, can you reach out for feedback, or can the nominating committee chair ask for feedback after meetings have taken place? I'm not sure what you mean by feedback. If you mean questions about a candidate, a possible candidate, then you might need to reach out to, let's say, the president if they know that person. But other than that, I'm not sure I can answer that question without a little bit more information. What do you do if a member of the nominating committee resigns and there are no alternates? You can meet with a majority of the nominating committee members. So you have 5 members and only 3 can attend for whatever reason, or 1 resigns, then you meet with 3, okay? As long as a majority of the members are present, So, this is a good thing about having 3 members of the nominating committee, but 5 at least gives you a little bit more leeway in terms of if somebody can't attend and you don't have an alternate. That's why the possibility of adding an alternate is probably a good one, just in case, because as much as you would like to hold a meeting at a time for everybody, sometimes people have events happening or emergencies that they are not able to attend. So by having an alternate, that can take that worry out of it. Okay, but as long as you have a majority of the members present, then you can meet. Can a PTA member inform the PTA that they are interested in a position? Yes, by all means, okay? By all means, that's what you do in your recommendation form, okay? And you can even, if you feel, you want to sign the form, I have these skills. Anybody can nominate themselves or recommend themselves. There's nothing wrong with that. If you feel that you can, that you can do a good job in a position. But again, if you're not nominated, you are still eligible to either to run from the floor or give your 2-day notice if your bylaws say that. So we're still not taking away your right to be available to, apply, or I shouldn't say apply, but potentially run for that position. Okay. About the potential nominees, I'm not sure about that question. Delegates are members on the council units, yes, okay. You said they can ask about a particular candidate. I'm not sure about that question. Yes, you should have an odd number of nominating committee members, yes, okay, and the bylaws wizard will not allow you to put in anything but an odd number, okay, more than 1, obviously. But if you try to put in 4, it will kick it back to you and say, nominating committee should be an odd number. So when you're doing your bylaws, you're not going to be able to put in anything but an odd number of members of the nominating committee. Okay. Okay. Let's see, anything else? Best to have an odd number. If the bylaws say to elect one alternate, is that the alternate from the board or from the association? It can be either. It can be an alternate, you know, just an alternate. It doesn't specify whether it needs to be from the executive board or from the association. So if you have more than one person who wants to become the alternate, then, you know, you can have an election just for the alternate. But yeah, it doesn't matter if it's from the board or the association. Okay. My little icon here. Anything else? Is that it? I guess that's it. Oh, there we go. Our VP is halfway through a 2-year term. Does she need to be reelected to that same position? Okay, 2-year term is different, okay? If you have a 2-year term, okay, then that person does not have to be renominated, all right? If you have in your bylaws that positions are for 2 years, then that person is entitled to 2 years, okay? So they do not need to be reelected. What I was talking about with the reelection is if your bylaws state that you have a 1-year term, which would be 2 consecutive 1-year terms. So there's either 2 consecutive 1-year terms or 1 2-year term. So if it's a 2-year term, then you're right. You do not have to be renominated or reelected. So you would technically only have an election every other year, okay? I'm confused about how the nominating committee is elected. Okay, good question. All right, so you need, let's say your bylaws state that you need 2 members from the executive board and 3 members from the general membership. So at the meeting that you're going to elect your nominating committee meeting, which again needs to be 60 days or more prior to your election meeting, when you're looking for the executive board members, only executive board members can vote in that particular election. So you would choose 2 people from your executive board, okay, elect them, and they would be your 2 members. Then for the association, that involves anyone who's a member, including your executive board, but the association members must not be part of the executive board. So everybody can vote for those, okay, but the people that are nominated cannot be an officer, cannot be a chairman of a standing committee, or anybody else that's on your executive board, like a historian, or you might have a teacher liaison. Your association members must come from the association. So that means they are not part of the executive board. So then you vote for those people so you could actually do it at the same meeting. You could do it at 2 different meetings, or you could do it at the same meeting. But for the association members, they cannot be part of the executive board, cannot be an officer or a chairman, a chairman of a standing committee, okay? And again, that can be done we could just do it at an executive board meeting for the executive board positions, and then you could do it at a general membership meeting, obviously, for the association people, okay? If a person has already served 2 years and we have no one for that position, can they serve a 3rd year? No, the bylaws do say that if they have served 2 years in that position, then it becomes a vacancy, and it is a vacancy which then gets filled in accordance with the bylaws. Once June 30th comes and there's nobody been nominated for that position or elected to that position, it is now a vacancy, and then a board meeting, executive board meeting has to be held, and then a person is elected by a vote of the executive board. Okay, but the bylaws do clearly state that you can serve only a maximum of 2 years. I've been to nominating committee workshops, and that was never discussed, how to pick the nominating committee members from general membership. Never heard that you exclude chairs from that group. Your chairs of standing committees are part of your executive board. They can be elected to the nominating committee as members of the executive board, okay? So you're not excluding them from being elected, but they have to be elected as members of the executive board. Anybody who is not an officer or a chairman of a standing committee, that would mean, people who are just, members who come and volunteer and help you out, they would be the people you choose for your members of the association. Okay, and the idea is to give a balance to the nominating committee so that you have members from both the executive board as well as from the general membership who may not have an office or may not serve as a chairman. It's not the whole committee, it's just the chairman of the standing committees. Committees like HARP or hospitality or beautification, whatever committees that run all year long. Okay, those are your standing committees. So those would be people who would be able to be elected as members of the executive board. Okay, but anybody not as a committee chair, not an officer, would be considered part of the association. Yes. Question? I think I'm at the end of my question list here. Another question do we have? I think that's all the questions I see up there. Anything? Questions? Other questions? Yes, no? Last call? Well, as I said before, if anyone has additional questions or you come up with something or something happens during a meeting that you need clarification on, you can certainly feel free to email me and I will be glad to give you an answer. Yes? Someone there to discuss? No? Yes? Okay, so I guess, okay, if you serve in a position for 2 years, can you serve in that position again after a break? Yes, you can. Okay, so if you have served 2 years as vice president and then you step away for a year, yes, you can serve for 2 years as a vice president again, as long as it's not continuous. Okay, so 2 years, take a break, 2 years, yes, you can do that. Okay, good question. Anything else? Last call? Okay. Then I guess we are done, and I thank you again for attending. I hope that you found this informative, and again, as before, you know, any questions, please feel free to email me and look for the additional workshops that we have, webinars that we have available coming up in the next couple of months, and they are listed on the website as Dana gave you before. Okay, thanks to all and have a good night.